My wife tattooed independent woman. So I gave her exactly what she asked for, independence that cost her everything. My wife decided to tattoo the phrase independent woman on her neck, and I, being consistent with her new motto, gave her precisely that independence. I freed her from my house and from all access to our joint accounts. I still have etched in my memory the exact moment I realized that my marriage, after 12 years, was beginning to collapse. It was a Tuesday in March, and the early morning was silent until the front door slammed so hard it echoed through the whole house. It was 1:48 a.m. when I opened my eyes, startled by the noise. I remember checking the phone, confirming the time, and lying back down with my heart pounding. Maybe it's best if I give you some context. My name is Dan. I'm 41 years old, and I've spent a decade and a half working as a civil engineer in the same company. I started there as a fresh graduate intern, and over the years, I worked my way up to leading large-scale projects. I'm not a millionaire by any means, but my income is enough to live comfortably, maintain an orderly household, and, up until then, guarantee my wife Jenny, who's 38, a life without financial worries. Jenny and I met in the university halls. A year after I graduated, we decided to get married. We didn't take long to move into a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver, into a spacious 4-bedroom home. We tried having children, but after several failed attempts and long conversations, we understood that parenthood wasn't in our destiny. So, we resigned ourselves to a life of just the two of us. To me, we were living a calm and satisfying existence. Occasional mountain getaways, 2 vacations a year, dinners with friends, and some family gatherings. Nothing flashy, but stable. Or at least that's what I thought. Until that night when Jenny came home, making far more noise than someone trying to sneak in should. Her heels clacked unevenly against the floor, the keys clattered loudly on the kitchen counter, and even her scarf brushed harshly against the hallway furniture. I pretended to be asleep, though every sound kept me tense. When she finally slipped into bed, an unfamiliar scent lingered in the air. It wasn't my cologne or anything I recognized. It was a pricey, woody, sophisticated perfume. That detail made my skin crawl. It wasn't the first time that week she came home past midnight with vague excuses about work dinners, networking events, or outings with her coworkers Sarah and Melissa, who worked with her at the marketing agency. That night, I didn't say a word. I turned my back in silence, building a wall with my body, but I decided we would have a conversation in the morning. And so on, I pretended to sleep, though every single sound kept me on edge. When she finally slipped under the covers, an unfamiliar scent spread through the air. It wasn't my cologne or anything I recognized. It was an expensive, woody, sophisticated fragrance. That detail sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the first time that week she had come home after midnight with vague excuses about work dinners, networking events, or outings with her colleagues Sarah and Melissa, who worked with her at the marketing agency. That night, I chose not to say anything. I simply turned over in silence, building a wall with my back, but deep down I decided that come morning, we would have a conversation. Still, I couldn't close my eyes the entire night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind gnawed by the same question over and over again. Was she cheating on me? Or was I just exaggerating, a victim of some absurd paranoia that comes with being in your 40s? My training as an engineer had conditioned me to resolve everything with data, evidence, and logical reasoning. But marriage isn't a mathematical equation. It's shifting ground, full of emotions, secrets, and silences. When dawn broke, I brewed coffee while my mind spun in 1,000 directions. I pictured different scenarios. Should I confront her immediately? Or should I wait until I had undeniable proof? As I debated, I heard the water running in the shower. Against all my principles, I felt a powerful urge to open her purse, which she had carelessly left on the kitchen counter. Never in my life had I gone through her things. We had always respected each other's privacy. But that morning, something inside me demanded answers. When I opened it, I found a receipt from a downtown restaurant, $237 for a dinner for 2, dated the day before. A knot formed in my stomach. I tried to convince myself she might have gone with a friend, or even some co-workers, but the seed of doubt was already planted. As I slipped the receipt back inside, I noticed something else, a card from a tattoo studio called Ink Soul, with a quote written up just the day before. Jenny had often mentioned wanting to get a tattoo, but she always backed out at the last minute, terrified of needles. This unsettled me, and the confirmation came minutes later, when she walked back into the room wearing a low-cut blouse I'd never seen before. The fabric revealed fresh ink across her collarbone, a phrase written in cursive, her skin still red and inflamed. Independent woman. I couldn't hold back. What's this supposed to mean? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. She looked me straight in the eye, defiant, almost as if she had been waiting for my reaction. I got it yesterday at Ink Soul, downtown. And yes, it's permanent. I don't need your permission, Dan. That challenging stare cut right through me. I gripped my coffee mug tight to keep from losing control. She was no longer the grateful wife who used to appreciate our stability. She was now someone who rejected everything we had built together. And what does that make me, then? I managed to say, wounded. You're a boring man with a monotonous life and mediocre expectations. I'm about to turn 40, Dan. I want to rediscover myself before it's too late. Her words were cold as she poured herself coffee, as if she were talking about something trivial. Those words marked a turning point. What we had built for more than a decade, the house, the retirement plans, the shared projects, suddenly became a prison in her eyes. What I saw as security, she saw as a cage. At one point, I tried asking her if there was someone else. The only response she gave me was a scornful laugh. The problem with you is that you plan everything. Life isn't about charts and calculations, Dan. Life is about feeling it, not organizing it. She snapped, slinging her purse over her shoulder before hurrying out to work. The days that followed became a silent hell. Jenny would come and go from the house without a word, and although she was physically there, it felt like she was living in a parallel universe where I didn't exist anymore. Weekends, which had once been filled with walks or quiet dinners, turned into tense, wordless standoffs. She spent more and more time out, and when she claimed she was with friends, she never bothered to introduce them to me. One Saturday afternoon, my friend Mike stopped by to watch a game. The moment he saw me, he could tell something was wrong. I didn't take long to unload everything I had been carrying. The sleepless nights, the tattoo, the constant evasions, and the feeling that the distance between Jenny and me was widening day after day. Mike nodded with a serious expression. My wife went through something similar last year. They call it the midlife crisis. It starts with a tattoo, then new friends, then changes in clothes. And in the end, you find out there's a third person involved, almost always someone like a CrossFit trainer or a coworker, he warned me. His advice was clear. I had to protect myself and figure out what was really happening before the situation spiraled out of control. It didn't take long for new signs to appear. One morning, I got a notification. $780 had been withdrawn from our joint account. When I asked Jenny about it, she just shrugged and said, I needed to refresh my wardrobe. I'm in a new stage of my life, and I want to dress the part. Don't you think we should talk about big expenses before making them? I asked, trying to stay calm. She rolled her eyes in annoyance. Do you seriously think I need your authorization to buy clothes? It's not about permission, Jenny. It's about respect. We're supposed to share this life, and making decisions together is part of that, I replied firmly. Within less than 2 weeks, another $1,950 vanished into purchases of exclusive brands. When I checked her credit cards, she had nearly $8,400 charged out of the $10,000 limit. The house began filling up with bags from luxury stores, often with the price tag still hanging. I couldn't recognize this behavior in the woman I had married. I tried opening up a dialogue, but every time I did, she responded with an exaggerated sigh, as though I were an exhausted father scolding a rebellious daughter. Money comes and goes, Dan. We've obsessed too much with saving for a future we don't even know will come. I live in the present. Maybe you should try it too, instead of being so boring. That very night, she dropped another bomb. She announced that she would be leaving from Thursday to Sunday for a so-called leadership retreat her company was hosting in Cabin. Something in her eyes gave me a terrible gut feeling. Where exactly? I asked, trying to sound casual. In Aspen, she replied curtly. Aspen? A leadership retreat. I repeated, incredulous. Yes, you know how my job is, she said coldly, as if the conversation was closed. But that same night, while she slept soundly, my suspicion finally got the best of me. I crossed a line I had sworn I'd never cross. I went through her phone. I knew I was invading her privacy, but I needed answers. And I found them. There were dozens of messages with someone named Ryan Fire, whom she described in her texts as her boss. The so-called retreat in Aspen wasn't that at all. It was a romantic getaway at a luxury resort, with a suite for 2 people at $680 a night, conveniently charged to our joint account. When I closed the phone and put it back, my heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a brutal confirmation. My wife wasn't only betraying me emotionally, she was betraying me financially as well. The mix of rage and devastation left me numb, but at the same time it lit a fire of determination I hadn't felt in years. I decided to comb through our bank statements with a magnifying glass. I spent entire nights at my desk, analyzing every transaction from the last 6 months. What I uncovered froze my blood. Jenny had opened 3 credit cards under my name, taking out cash advances that were already maxed out. The minimum payments were all being drafted straight from our joint account, without me knowing a thing. When I added up the spending on designer clothes, jewelry, exclusive restaurants, and hotels, the total exceeded $30,000 in barely half a year. Meanwhile, our everyday life was quietly falling apart. The woman who used to get up on Sundays to make pancakes and share the newspaper with me now barely spoke a word. Even her style changed drastically, from practical, comfortable clothes to skin-tight designer dresses, more provocative with each passing week, as if she were deliberately trying to show off that tattoo on her neck. Shopping bags littered the living room floor, $400 or $500 price tags dangling openly, and the stream of withdrawal notifications to my phone never stopped. Jenny now kept her phone face down at all times, changing her passwords every week. There wasn't a single conversation in my presence. Her new friends, names I'd never heard before, suddenly became the protagonists of her daily routine. The feeling of living with a stranger tormented me. One afternoon, coming back from a mailbox, I ran into our neighbor, Esteve. He looked at me with unease, and after hesitating for a few seconds, he lowered his voice. Dan, I don't want to be nosy, but I've seen Jenny arrive in a white Range Rover twice this week when you weren't home. I felt my stomach knot, but I forced a smile of gratitude. Thanks, Esteve. I suspected as much, I told him with the little breath I had left. He patted my shoulder. If you need someone to talk to, or even a place to crash, you know where to find me. His kindness hit me hard. I spent the following weeks consumed by loneliness and uncertainty, until one night, over dinner, I finally couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront her directly. Who is Ryan Fire? I blurted out suddenly, without preamble. Why are you texting him all the time? Jenny lifted her gaze slowly, her fingers frozen above her phone screen. He's in the marketing department, the new creative director, she said flatly, without a hint of concern. Creative director? You never mentioned that before. I shot back, narrowing my eyes. She shrugged, full of disdain. We're growing. There are new faces. What difference does it make? Her lie hung in the air like thick smoke. I didn't know about the Range Rover, nor why she was riding in one now. I pretended to accept her explanation, nodding as if convinced, and kept eating, though inside I was burning. That same night, while she slept, I logged into our cell provider system. What I found was devastating. 67 calls to that same number, all during her breaks or after work, plus thousands of text messages. And the worst was yet to come. Going through some hidden documents at her desk, I discovered she had signed a personal loan for $15,000, using our house as collateral. This wasn't a marriage in crisis anymore. It was a calculated fraud against me. The revelation left me paralyzed for several minutes. Just knowing Jenny had gambled our home, without even telling me, filled me with an icy chill that spread from head to toe. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was a direct attack on everything I had worked for over 15 years. In that moment, I knew I had to protect myself because the person in front of me was no longer my wife. She was someone capable of destroying me without the slightest remorse. The next morning, over breakfast, I tried to bring up the subject carefully. "We need to talk about this," I said, while she absent-mindedly pushed a piece of toast around her plate, her eyes glued to her phone. "Are you starting with your drama again?" she snapped, not even looking at me. "What about Ryan? Or do you prefer to keep lying?" I finally blurted out, unable to hold my anger any longer. She didn't deny a thing. On the contrary, she shot me a haughty glare and replied, "You suffocate me with your retirement plans, your spreadsheets, and that obsession of yours with controlling everything. I gave you freedom, even financial freedom, and now you accuse me as if I were some kind of criminal. You know what, Dan? You're the one stealing my independence. Independence doesn't mean destroying everything we've built together," I whispered, my voice breaking. Instead of answering, she stood up, grabbed a Gucci purse I had never seen before, surely worth over $1,000, and said with utter disdain, "I don't have time for your lectures. I'm going to lunch with some friends. And don't wait up. I'm going out to a new club downtown tonight." I was left alone in the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a still warm cup of coffee, wondering how we had gotten to this point. We had gone from being a stable, grateful couple to becoming enemies under the same roof. The confirmation of my suspicions came soon after, thanks again to Esteve, my neighbor. One evening he sent me a message, "White Range Rover, Ritz-Carlton downtown, in case you want to know." That sentence was enough. I got in my car and drove straight to the hotel. From the lobby, I saw them, Jenny and Ryan, impeccably dressed, sitting at the bar as if they were a well-established couple. He wore a designer watch and a perfect haircut. She was smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I pulled out my phone, snapped several photos, and left quietly. I drove to a nearby cafe and typed into Google, "Best divorce lawyers in Denver." I saved several contacts to my list. When Jenny came home at 1 in the morning, her clothes reeking of expensive cologne, I pretended to be asleep. At that point, I no longer had doubts, not even pain, only numbers and strategies. I had already made up my mind. If she wanted independence, she would get it. And that tattoo she flaunted like a banner would become the most expensive one of her life. The very next morning, I dialed the number of Catherine, one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the city. Her consultation cost $500 an hour, but it was the best investment of my life. I laid out my entire story in detail, from the tattoo to the falsified bank statements. She listened calmly, and in the end said firmly, "There's solid grounds here for a divorce lawsuit on adultery and financial misconduct. But if you want the best outcome, you have to be patient and strategic. Don't confront her anymore. Gather evidence, but don't alert her." I nodded silently. I understood that what lay ahead wouldn't be quick or easy. But the cold determination in Catherine's eyes gave me confidence that I was in good hands. The plan had to be executed with surgical precision. The following weekend, while we were having breakfast, Jenny dropped one of those lines that seemed rehearsed to provoke me. "Tomorrow night, I'm hosting a dinner here at the house," she said casually, without lifting her eyes from her phone. I raised my gaze from the newspaper and frowned. "A dinner? Since when do you host gatherings on a Sunday night?" I asked, incredulous. "Obviously, I'm not cooking," she replied sarcastically. "I hired a catering service. It'll be something intimate, just a few people from my new social circle." I nearly choked on my coffee. I sat there in silence for a few seconds, just looking at her. Finally, I said, "Maybe you should consider me finding somewhere else to be then. I don't think I'll enjoy it." She rolled her eyes with theatrical indifference. "That's exactly why I need space. Negotiating with you is exhausting, Dan. It's like being married to someone ordinary, predictable, and dull." The word ordinary cut through me like a knife. 12 years of marriage reduced to a cruel insult. I folded the newspaper calmly and, without losing my composure, said, "Fine, have your party. I'll lock myself in the study." Her surprised expression told me something important. She had been expecting a fight, shouting, maybe even an outburst. But my calmness confirmed what I already knew. Jenny didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted an enemy to defeat. That same afternoon, I texted Catherine. Plan in motion. Tonight, Jenny's having guests. I'll document everything. She replied almost immediately. Perfect. Take pictures, record what you can, but no confrontations. At 7:30 p.m., the thumping of music began to rattle the entire house. When I went downstairs, I could hardly recognize my own living room. The furniture had been pushed against the walls, expensive champagne bottles were everywhere, and a sound system blasted at full volume. In the middle of it all, Jenny was laughing and dancing close to a tall man with slick back hair and a luxury watch. I didn't have to think twice. It was Ryan. His hands roamed shamelessly down my wife's back while she swayed like she was at a nightclub. The dress she wore probably cost more than my car payment. I stood on a landing, recording the scene on my phone, until someone spilled a glass of red wine all over our white sofa, the one we had spent 6 months paying off. That was the breaking point. I turned off the music and flipped on the lights. The noise froze into an awkward silence. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jenny shouted, furious, her face red with rage. "Me? The only thing I'm doing is protecting what's left of my house. This party is over. Everyone out. Now," I said firmly. The guests began backing toward the door, unsure. Only Ryan stayed put, arms crossed, as if daring me. I pointed at him calmly. "Introduce me, Jenny. After all, you seem to be spending quite a lot of time with him." "This isn't your business," Ryan muttered, his voice dripping with contempt. I let out a bitter laugh. "Not my business? Having your boss in my living room while you turn our house into a college frat party isn't my business." Ryan mumbled, "Fine, I'm leaving," and walked toward the door. Before he left, I stepped closer and whispered in his ear, "Smart choice. Believe me, you don't want what's coming." Jenny turned pale. Her defiant mask cracked in seconds. She looked at me like she suddenly knew something had changed forever. Then I spoke calmly, locking eyes with her. "Ryan has a wife. Her name's Susan. Did you know that?" The blood drained from her face instantly. The silence that followed spoke louder than any scream. Jenny swayed on her feet, as if the ground had been pulled from under her. "How dare you?" she stammered, her voice a mix of anger and fear. "This is my house." I let out a bitter chuckle. "Your house. I cover 85% of the mortgage. And now look at it, turned into a circus with the sofa we paid thousands for ruined by your friend's wine." She tried to laugh sarcastically, regaining ground. "Pathetic and materialistic, Dan. All you ever think about is money and objects." "Interesting accusation," I replied, arms crossed. "Coming from someone who blew over 12 grand on clothes last month and even took out a loan, putting our house at risk." Jenny was speechless. The color drained from her cheeks. "Were you spying on me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "It wasn't spying. Your own bank statements tell the story. Your own carelessness exposed everything," I said coldly. She took a deep breath, as if finally surrendering. "Fine, yes. Ryan and I are seeing each other. But you need to understand something. He understands me in a way you never could." I raised an eyebrow. "And his wife, Susan, does she know?" "Susan," she whispered, almost choking on the name. "Yes. I spoke to her yesterday. She loved the photos I sent." Jenny's defiant facade collapsed completely. The confidence she had carried for months crumbled like a house of cards. "Our marriage has been dead for a long time." She tried to justify herself, lowering her voice. I leaned toward her, keeping my composure. "I've noticed every lie, every missing dollar, every night you chose to spend with strangers instead of with me. Don't try to dress it up." Fear flickered in her eyes. "What does that mean?" she asked, clutching her purse to her chest. I gave her a cold half-smile. "It means your precious independence is about to get very expensive. Nothing in this life is free, Jenny. Not that tattoo. Not the hotel rooms with your married boss. Not betraying someone who trusted you with everything." That night, I slept in the guest room. Through the wall, I could hear her frantic phone calls, desperately trying to put out the fire she had lit herself. Meanwhile, I sent one last message to Catherine. "Confrontation done." She admitted it. "Plan continues this weekend." Her reply came minutes later. "Good. Get some rest. The real work starts Friday." The next morning, before heading to the office, I checked our joint account. Another withdrawal, this time $3,200. But instead of getting angry, I felt an odd sense of calm. Now I could see the pattern. Every Monday morning, without fail, she pulled money out. It was like a cursed clock she herself had set against us. I wasn't thinking about saving the marriage anymore. The only thing that mattered now was documenting every single move so that, when the time came, the independence she bragged about would turn into a lesson she couldn't escape from. With the information I was collecting, Catherine and I began to build a rock-solid case. We had hotel receipts, proof of unauthorized expenses, compromising messages, and records of a loan she had taken out behind my back. Every piece was part of a puzzle that revealed systematic fraud. Catherine explained that with this level of evidence, I could not only file for divorce on grounds of adultery, but also demand financial compensation for embezzlement. The key was to remain calm and not alert her. I had to become a patient observer, quietly gathering every shred of evidence until the perfect moment. Meanwhile, Jenny went on as if nothing was happening. She came home late, spent money recklessly, and talked about trips as if we were living in some fairy tale. One evening she told me she was planning to attend an executive retreat in Cape Town the following week. I nodded with a fake smile, though inside, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Catherine had already flagged financial activity pointing to that destination. It was obvious. She was preparing yet another romantic escape with Ryan. In the days leading up to it, I focused on what I called Operation Independence. Every night, once Jenny fell asleep, I locked myself in the study to review documents, screenshots of messages, and bank statements. I wanted everything perfectly organized for the final blow. On Thursday, I met with Marcus, a trusted financial advisor. Together, we opened an individual account in a different bank under my name, transferring precisely the contributions I had made over the years. We logged every paycheck, every savings deposit, every unauthorized expense she had racked up. Marcus looked at me with genuine surprise at how meticulous I had been. "Dan, with this level of detail, your case is bulletproof," he said, flipping through the documents. "You've handled this like an engineer calculating every inch of a bridge." I nodded silently. I couldn't allow 15 years of effort to evaporate because of a whim disguised as a new stage in life. That Friday, at Catherine's office, she asked me the key question. "What do you hope to achieve from all this, Dan?" I looked her straight in the eye and answered firmly. "I want to keep what belongs to me, and I want Jenny to feel the true weight of the independence she's been preaching." She nodded without hesitation. "Then we'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial fraud. But first, secure your assets. Leave no loose ends." I closed the file calmly. Never in my life had I been so sure of a decision. That same Friday, without leaving room for doubt, I transferred exactly half of the balance from our joint account into my new one. Not a cent more, not a cent less. I left the other half untouched, but froze any possibility of further withdrawals. Marcus frowned, as if expecting me to drain everything, but my plan wasn't to wipe it clean. My goal was to ensure that every step was legally airtight. When the time came, I didn't want Jenny to accuse me of anything. That same day, after locking everything down with Marcus, I scheduled an appointment with a realtor who specialized in furnished apartment rentals. I needed a place to start fresh, somewhere Jenny would have no access to and no knowledge of. We toured several properties, but I chose a modern unit downtown, with huge windows and a mountain view. I paid the deposit with my personal savings and scheduled the move of my essentials for Saturday morning. I didn't stop there. I also met with Susan, Ryan's wife. I handed her a dossier full of photos, screenshots of messages, and proof of hotel stays. She listened quietly, though she didn't look surprised. "I suspected for months," she admitted with a sigh. "But thanks to you, now I have hard evidence. I promise you Ryan won't get away with half of my company." We agreed to file our lawsuits in parallel the following Monday. I would file for adultery and financial fraud, and she would file for infidelity and misappropriation of company assets. Two separate fronts crashing down on Jenny and Ryan at the same time, like a perfectly calculated storm. During those days, Jenny kept behaving as if nothing was wrong. She was so absorbed in her executive retreats, her new life, and her fantasies that she didn't even notice I had stopped questioning her at night. My apparent resignation convinced her she had everything under control. That was the advantage I needed. On Thursday night, I reviewed the roadmap for what would be the final act. While Jenny went upstairs to pack her bags, I quietly listed each step in my head. 1. File the divorce petition with all the evidence ready to serve her as soon as she returned. 2. Sign the purchase contract for 2 small condos and secure the keys. 3. Schedule the move of my most important belongings for Saturday morning. 4. Hire a locksmith to change the house locks that same Saturday afternoon. 5. Transfer all utilities into my name exclusively, paying the deposits myself. 6. Request a preventive restraining order, backed by testimony from Esteve and other neighbors. 7. Calculate down to the cent what was rightfully mine from the joint savings, subtracting the nearly $28,000 she had squandered without permission, and prepare to move that amount. 8. Notify all credit card issuers that I no longer authorized any charges under her name. On Friday morning, I prepared a flawless breakfast: Eggs Benedict, freshly squeezed orange juice, and a cordial smile. Jenny looked at me suspiciously. Maybe she expected my usual resentment or some last-minute reproach. "You seem happy," she said, her voice tinged with doubt. "Sometimes a little space is good for both of us," I replied calmly, even helping her carry her suitcase to the car. I watched her leave for the airport, unaware that the moment she turned the corner, the first call on my list would already be ringing. By noon, everything was in motion like clockwork. The remaining balance transfer was done, the joint accounts frozen, the credit card companies notified, and the utilities updated with my information. I also changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy, naming my sister instead of Jenny, and placed a fraud alert on my social security number to prevent further abuse. Each confirmation email that arrived in my inbox was another piece of a controlled demolition of our marriage. On Saturday at 8 sharp, the movers arrived. I'd already packed the essentials: clothes, documents, family keepsakes, and a few heirloom pieces of furniture. Everything was photographed and cataloged. By the afternoon, the locksmith had done his part. The locks changed, the new keys in my pocket. That night, I delivered a sealed envelope to Catherine's office. Inside was a detailed report of every move I had made over the past 3 days, along with the address where she could find the new keys. I didn't want a single loose end left behind. Sunday was entirely dedicated to setting up my new apartment. I unpacked the boxes, arranged the inherited furniture, and tried to give the space a sense of home. Even though deep down, I knew both the place and my life were still under construction. I called a few contacts I had in rival firms. For years, I knew they valued my experience as a project engineer. Now, more than ever, I needed those connections. By Monday morning, it was time to execute the final phase. Susan and I acted in parallel. She filed her lawsuit against Ryan, demanding the immediate freeze of his business assets. At the same time, we sent the company's board all the documentation proving he had used corporate funds to cover luxury hotel stays. Within hours, the scandal erupted. Meanwhile, Catherine delivered the divorce papers to Jenny. I could picture the scene: Jenny coming home after her trip, finding the locks changed, calling her mother in a panic, and then finally showing up at Catherine's office, only to be handed the document that sealed the end of our story. I wasn't there to see it, but I lived it through the notifications on my phone. Each message from Jenny grew more desperate. "Dan, what have you done? Call me now. The accounts are blocked. I can't use my cards. Are you out of your mind? The bank says I can't take out any more loans. I've been removed from every account. Even the utilities are asking me for a $500 deposit. HR just summoned me. What did you do?" I read every single one of those messages in silence, without replying. For the first time in months, I felt peace. This wasn't blind revenge. It was calculated justice. At last, I sent her one short reply: "Talk to your lawyer. Everything is in order." 2 days passed before I finally answered one of her calls. Her voice was no longer that of the haughty woman who once shouted boring and ordinary at me. Now it was broken, fragile, laced with sobs. "Dan, I made a terrible mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry," she stammered through tears. I stayed calm, speaking as though I were talking to a stranger. Now you're free to live with the consequences of your decisions, Jenny. Please, I need you. I have nowhere to go, she begged. I coldly reminded her that the house was still in her name, though with a loan hanging over it that would eventually lead the bank to foreclose. That would at least give her a roof for a few months. We can talk, she pleaded, searching desperately for some opening in my wall. There's nothing to talk about. Everything is calculated, everything is signed. You'll get what's rightfully yours, about $42,000 after deducting your unauthorized spending. And I won't contest that figure. I answer, my voice sharp. There was a long silence before she whispered, I love you, Dan. No, Jenny. What you loved wasn't me. You loved the security I provided. You treated me like a sponsor, not like a partner, I said firmly. That was our last phone call. I ended the conversation with a dry, enjoy your independence. Before she could reply, I hung up and blocked her number. A week later, I got a call from her sister, Marahi. She was crying on the other end. She's destroyed, Dan. Ryan dumped her, she's broke, and she's crashing on my couch, crying nonstop. Can't you at least talk to her? I took a deep breath before answering. I talked to her for 12 years, Marahi. This time I won't. But she made a mistake, Marahi insisted. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, I interrupted. What Jenny did was make thousands of deliberate choices to betray, steal, and humiliate the person who supported her. That's not a mistake. That's her true character. And I hung up. The following days confirmed there was no going back. Marahi called me again later, this time with a tone bordering on reproach. She's lost everything, Dan. Her job, the house, her credit. She's selling her clothes and handbags for pennies just to eat. She's waiting tables now. Can you believe it? A woman who bragged about independence and luxury, serving tables at a cheap restaurant. I closed my eyes for a moment before replying calmly. That's what she chose. For years, she thought I was her safety net. Now she'll have to face life without me. You're heartless, Marahi said, her voice breaking. No, I answered serenely. I just learned to value myself. And maybe, if she's lucky, Jenny will learn that lesson too. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized far quicker than I expected, thanks in large part to Catherine's surgical precision and the mountain of evidence we had gathered. Jenny tried to contest a couple of points, but her lawyers knew she didn't stand a chance. In the end, she signed, resigned, and defeated, like someone simply wanting to close a painful chapter. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard fragments of her new life. At 38, she had moved back in with her parents, juggling 2 jobs, mornings as a waitress, nights as a bartender. The house we once shared was foreclosed because of the loan she had signed without my consent, and her credit was in ruins. Even her tattoo turned into a cruel reminder. She tried removing it with laser treatments, but couldn't afford it. I, on the other hand, started to thrive. I accepted an offer at a rival company with a 30% salary increase. I moved into a modern condo downtown with a panoramic view of the mountains. I signed up for rock climbing classes and joined a hiking group. For the first time in years, I made new friends and rediscovered passions I had long put on hold. 8 months after everything fell apart, on a Saturday morning, I was having coffee in my usual cafe when I heard my name. I turned and saw her, Jenny, dressed in the uniform of the restaurant where she worked. There was nothing left of the woman who once wore designer dresses and luxury handbags. Now she had on plain black pants, practical shoes, and her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. The only thing that remained was the tattoo on her neck, a scar of what had once been her pride. Dan, she murmured, her voice trembling. I didn't expect to see you here. Jenny, I replied, surprised. How are you? She gave me a timid, melancholy smile. Do you really want to know? She asked softly. For a moment, I considered standing up and walking away. But curiosity got the better of me. I pointed to an empty table. About a few minutes. We sat in silence. It felt surreal to be across from the woman who had been the center of my life for years and now seemed like a total stranger. The silence between us was a wall. Jenny fidgeted with her coffee cup, unable to meet my eyes. Finally, she spoke in a frail voice. I'm sorry, Dan. I know it won't change anything, but I want you to know I truly am sorry. I watched her for a few seconds, trying to decide whether those words came from regret or from sheer desperation. Tell me what really happened, I said firmly. And don't give me excuses about a midlife crisis. I want to know what was actually going through your head. She slowly lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering with restrained tears. I don't know if I can explain it with logic. I was nearing 40 and felt like everything I had was boring, predictable. Then Ryan showed up, giving me attention, making me feel special, desired. He talked about an exciting life, about travel, about luxury, and I let myself get carried away by that fantasy. To sustain it, I used the money from the house loan. He had expensive tastes, and I tried to become the woman he wanted. She paused, a bitter smile on her face. I even promised Susan we'd run away, that we'd start a business, that we'd never have to worry about money. But it was all smoke. I was stupid. Yes, you were, I replied harshly. But you didn't leave me by mistake, Jenny. You left me because you were cruel. You despised me, mocked our life, called me boring, and treated our marriage like a prison. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I said those things because it was easier to paint you as the villain than admit I was destroying something valuable for an illusion. We sat in silence for a long while. I watched as she lowered her gaze, defeated, while I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if, for the first time in years, I had finally recovered the voice she had tried so hard to silence. At last, I broke the silence. And your parents? They support me, though they're disappointed. They're still on my side. I'm saving up to pay for laser treatments to get rid of this tattoo, she said, nervously touching her neck. I smirked with irony. Well, I'm glad you're focusing on what really matters, I said, standing up. I have to go. I've got a climbing session later. She looked genuinely surprised. Climbing? Yes, Jenny. Turns out I'm not as boring or ordinary as you once called me. She gave a fragile half-smile. Take care of yourself, Dan. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Do you think you could ever forgive me someday? I stayed silent for a few seconds before answering honestly. I already forgave you, but forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I understand. Thank you for listening. I walked out of the cafe with the Colorado sun warming my face. For the first time, I felt a new lightness, as if the anger that had consumed me for months had finally been replaced by something better. Indifference. Jenny no longer had power over my happiness. As I crossed the cafe's threshold, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lisa, one of the women from the hiking group I'd been talking to over the past few weeks. Still up for tomorrow's hike? Looks like the weather's going to be perfect, son. I smiled, feeling a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. I replied right away. Of course. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Driving back to my new apartment, I thought about the irony of it all. Jenny had sought independence through a married man, through luxury items, and through an artificial life. And in the process, she lost everything. Her home, her marriage, her financial stability, even her reputation. I, on the other hand, had found true independence by learning to value myself, by taking control of my life, and by building a future on my own terms. I remember a phrase I often repeated to myself. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you ask for, but never in the way you expect. Jenny had asked for independence, and she got it, but in the harshest version possible. I had never asked for revenge, yet life delivered it to me wrapped in justice. Over the following months, my career flourished. My new friendships energized me, and each day that passed confirmed that I had made the right choices. And while sometimes fleeting memories would resurface, they carried no nostalgia, only lessons learned. Jenny became nothing more than a shadow in my past, an example of how arrogance and unchecked ambition can destroy everything. That tattoo on her neck, once a symbol of defiance, turned into a permanent mark of irony. The independence she flaunted had become her downfall. I, meanwhile, was enjoying a calm, steady life. Climbing rocks, hiking trails, laughing with new friends, feeling genuinely free. I was a different man now, renewed, stronger, and most importantly, in complete control of myself.